Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. At night, when the sky quiets and the stars shimmer, like sleepy thoughts, the moon hangs above the earth like a silver lantern. She is not loud, not hurried. She does not shout or push, but still she moves entire oceans, and the sea listens. This is not magic, though it may feel like it. It is a dance, one older than language, older than the first fish that ever felt the tug of waves on their backs. It is gravity, soft and steady, reaching across 3,000–4,000 kilometers of space, drawing water toward the sky. When the moon faces one side of Earth, her pull is strong. Oceans swell gently as if rising to greet her. This is high tide, but the moon also pulls on the Earth itself, just enough to create another bulge of water on the opposite side. Two high tides following the moon's slow path around our planet, and as the moon drifts, the bulges move too. Not fast, never fast, like breath. Like a slow inhale and exhale, the sea lifts and lowers every 6 hours, marking time not with numbers but with motion. Even in the deepest parts of the sea, the tide stirs. Mountains hidden under water feel it. Whales drifting in silent blue feel it. Tiny plankton floating like stars beneath the surface rise and fall with it. Tides reach them all. Now imagine, you're standing barefoot at the edge of the ocean. The wet sand holds you lightly. Around your ankles, the water pulls back. A hush before the wave returns. This is not just water moving, it is the moon, whispering to the earth, and the earth replying. The sun joins this conversation too. Her gravity is stronger than the moon's, but she is far away. When the moon and sun line up, during new and full moons, their combined pull creates higher tides called spring tides, not because of the season, but because the water springs higher than usual. When they are at right angles, we get neap tides, gentler, more modest. This rhythm continues every day, twice a day in most places, high, then low, a reliable heartbeat of the planet. Fishermen know it, crabs know it, even birds flying over the waves know where to land and when to feed. The tide speaks, and life listens. On some coastlines, tides are small, a gentle lap. On others, they rise like breath held too long, surging meters high, before slipping away again. In places like the Bay of Fundy in Canada, the tide can rise over 16 meters, washing away rocks and shaping the land. A quiet force, shaping the earth slowly over time. Ancient people watched the moon and learned her language. They carved marks into stones, counted the days, told stories of gods and sea spirits. But behind all of it was this same pull, invisible, constant, soft as gravity. Now, let's drift deeper. Below the waves, where light begins to fade, tides stir the ocean's nutrients. They mix waters, lifting food from the dark to the light. They guide coral spawning, the travels of turtles, the journeys of baby fish. Even in the coldest, darkest corners of the deep sea, tides bring motion. Not much light reaches there, but the moon's pull still does. The ocean listens, even when no one is watching. And perhaps that's the quiet wonder of it all, that something so far away, something we cannot touch, can reach across space and move our world, gently, repeatedly, without a single sound. Tonight, if you look up at the moon, remember this. She is speaking to the ocean, and the ocean is listening. Every wave is a word, every tide a reply. The moon does not shout commands to the sea. She calls gently through the hush of space, through a pull that never stops, not even when clouds cover her face. Gravity is her voice, and the ocean understands. It always has. Let's drift a little further now, deeper into the tide's secret world. Beneath the surface, water does not simply rise and fall, it flows in long, slow rivers called tidal currents. These are not like storm-driven waves or wind-whipped crests. They are quieter, steadier, almost like sleepwalking. In estuaries, bays and narrow channels, these currents swirl in and out, carrying silt, plankton, and stories older than the land itself. In places like the Amazon River, the tide pushes upstream against the river's natural flow. This is called a tidal bore. A wall of water, strong yet ancient, surges inland for kilometres. You can hear it before you see it. A hush, a roar, a memory of the moon's reach. And all of this from something that hangs in the sky. Our moon was not always there. Long ago, Earth was alone. Then something struck her, perhaps a planet-sized object. From that collision, a ring of molten stone circled the Earth. Over time, it gathered into the moon we now see. And from that moment on, the dance began. Each day the moon tugs at the oceans, but the Earth resists, just a little. Water lags behind. This tug of war creates friction, not loud, but constant. And this friction slowly slows the Earth's spin. A whisper of resistance, 1/1000th of a second lost each century. It doesn't feel like much, but over millions of years it adds up. The moon too is changing. She's drifting away, about 3.8 centimetres each year. Slowly, silently, she steps back from the Earth. The tides are growing weaker over time, but still, the connection remains, a bond stretched across space but never broken. Tides do more than move water, they shape life itself. Horseshoe crabs, with their ancient blue blood, come ashore only when the tide and moon align. For hundreds of millions of years they've trusted that rhythm. Salmon time their return to rivers with the pull of tides. Sea turtles wait for high tide to nest, laying their eggs in sand touched briefly by the ocean. Even tiny creatures, larval fish, drifting like dream fragments, rise and fall with the tides. They are carried to food, away from danger, guided by an invisible hand. Coastal plants depend on this rise and fall too. Mangroves stretch their tangled roots where the sea visits twice a day. Saltmarsh grasses sway with each tide, filtering water, sheltering life. These edges, where land and sea kiss, are full of life because the tide keeps coming back. People have listened to the tides for thousands of years. Fishermen read them like poems. Sailors watch for their turn. Entire cities like Venice rise and sink with their rhythm. In some places, the tide's mood decides when children can cross to school or when boats may leave the shore. And in the Arctic, where ice melts into sea, the tides are changing. Warmer waters shift the balance. Glaciers carve with each surge. Scientists study the tides not just to understand today, but to hear what tomorrow might whisper. Tides also touch us in places we might not expect. In our blood there is salt, the echo of ancient oceans. In our hearts there is rhythm, like the sea's own beat. Some scientists once wondered if our sleep cycles followed the moon. Others still explore how lunar rhythms might guide animal behaviour. There is no final answer, but perhaps that is part of the beauty. The tide is both science and dance. A certainty we still do not fully understand, and think of this. The moon is not the only one who pulls. The Earth too pulls on the moon, shaping her. The same forces that lift the sea also create tides inside the moon herself, heating her crust, shaping her scars. Is a conversation back and forth, always gentle, always ongoing. Now imagine you're far out at sea, where no land is near. Even here the tide moves below. You cannot see it. But if you stay long enough, if you float still and listen, you might feel the sea swell just a little, then soften again. Time bends to this rhythm. Long before we named ours, people counted the tide. They sang songs to mark the flood and ebb. They watched the moon to know when to plant, when to fish, when to rest. In Japan, poets once wrote of tsukimi, moon viewing. They sat beside rivers, watching the light ripple in water, feeling the slow tide beneath their boats. Not just beauty, but understanding. The moon, the tide, and the heart all reflecting one another. And in the quiet hours of night, when the sky is still and the wind rests, you can almost hear the tide breathing, not in waves, but in weight. In the way water leans forward, then gently falls back. No matter where you are, the moon is with you, pulling oceans, shaping time, guiding life, and doing it all without ever making a sound. Now, let's move a little further still to the soft closing of this story. The moon has more to show us, more tides to reveal. Let us follow her one last time into the peace of understanding. The moon has never stopped watching us. Night after night, she rises, sometimes bold and round, sometimes thin as a sigh, yet always present, always pulling, and always the ocean follows. As we come to the close of this quiet journey, we find ourselves once more beside the sea, listening to her ancient reply. Tides are more than just movements of water, they are a memory. The sea remembers the moon's voice from billions of years ago. Long before humans, long before birds or trees, the tide was already rising and falling. The ocean kept that rhythm like a lullaby whispered through time. Even now, satellites above us track the subtle swelling of oceans. Instruments on the seafloor feel the pressure of every tide. They measure, they record, they map the breathing of the earth. But no matter how precise the tools, the feeling remains the same. Something soft, something beyond the numbers. Tides give shape to coastlines, sculpting cliffs, carrying sand, smoothing stones with endless patience. A wave touches the shore for a second, but over centuries those seconds become landscapes. Caves carved from salt and foam, beaches built grain by grain. The ocean reshapes the land in silence, guided by the moon's gentle pull. There are places on Earth where the tide is like a clock that sings. In Mont Saint-Michel in France, water races across the bay surrounding the island Abbey twice a day. It is said the tide there comes in as fast as a galloping horse. But even in its speed, there is grace. A reminder that water can be both powerful and kind. In Alaska, the turn-again-arm tides rise and fall with dramatic strength, drawing surfers who ride the bore, a single crest that travels miles upstream. They wait, listen, and catch the moment. A conversation between sea and sky caught under human feet. Yet for most of the world, the tide is quiet. A lift, a fall, a slow return, and on tropical shores, the receding tide leaves behind tide pools, tiny worlds of colour and life. In a single pool, you might find a starfish, a crab, an anemone, and a patch of sunlight caught in water. These are places where time stands still, if only for a moment. And what of the creatures who depend on this movement? Mussels cling tightly to rocks, safe when the water retreats. Sea cucumbers bury themselves when the tide is low. Birds sweep in to feed, knowing that the rhythm will bring fresh food with each return. The moon's song teaches them all. In the modern world, we still build our lives around the tides, though we may not notice. Ports schedule ships by the tide's grace. Engineers design bridges and harbours to account for the water's lift. Renewable energy projects harness tidal currents to spin turbines and power lights, electricity pulled from the moon's long embrace. And when disasters strike, like tsunamis or storm surges, it is often the tide that makes the difference. A high tide can lift a wave higher. A low tide can offer a small, precious delay. Scientists study the tide not just for curiosity, but for safety, for hope. Yet even with all our science, the tide remains something we feel more than we understand. We feel it in our bones when we walk along the shore. We feel it in the hush between waves. We feel it when we stand ankle deep in retreating water, and the sea seems to ask us to wait. The moon does not ask for applause. She simply orbits. She simply pulls. And in doing so, she gives rhythm to an entire planet. Her influence reaches across time, across oceans, across every creature who has ever looked up at her glowing face. Some ancient cultures believed the moon was a goddess, her arms pulling the waters up to meet her. Others imagined the sea rising to kiss her reflection. And though we now speak of gravity and motion, the mystery remains. How beautiful that something so quiet can be so powerful. Let's return one last time to that place where land and sea meet. The tide has gone out, leaving behind footprints, shells, pieces of driftwood. The sand is cool, the air is soft, The horizon curves gently, and above it the moon waits. You may not hear her voice, but you can feel it, in the hush of the water, in the stillness before the next wave. You are part of this story too. Your body, full of salt and water, is a small echo of the sea. You are moved in quiet ways by the same pull. The tide is not a thing that ends. It returns. It always returns. Each wave that leaves comes back again. Each pull is answered. Each silence is followed by a new sound. This is the rhythm of life. This is the science of the sea. And so, as we gently close the story of how the moon controls the ocean, we leave not with answers, but with awe. The tide continues, slow and soft. The moon still watches, the ocean still listens, and somewhere quietly we do too. The moon pulls, the sea follows, and the earth, in her silence, turns once more toward the light. When the world sleeps and the wind softens to a hush, the sea continues to move. Beneath the silence of stars and the silver curve of the moon, the tides stir quietly, as if breathing in dreams. This is the sky's secret, that far above, where constellations glow like ancient lullabies, the tides still listen. They do not sleep. High above the earth, the moon drifts through a river of invisible threads. These threads are gravity, unseen, unfelt, but everywhere. Like soft strings of a silent harp, they connect everything to everything else. The moon plucks these strings and the ocean sings. Long ago, before maps and machines, people knew the sky by heart. They watched the moon change shape night by night, and with each phase the sea changed too. Fishermen learned when the tides would lift their boats. Farmers waited for the right tide to flood the rice fields. Sailors set their journeys by the swell of the tide and the tilt of the stars. This bond between sky and sea shaped the way life moved. Let us imagine now, far out at sea, under a sky filled with stars. There is no land in sight, only the soft roll of waves, and above, the moon casting her light in thin, silver threads across the water. Beneath that glow, the ocean moves in ways most never see. Here, tidal forces reach beyond coastlines. They sink into the deep, stirring the layers of water like the turning of pages in a heavy book. Cold, nutrient-rich waters rise slowly, bringing food to the surface. These upwellings feed plankton, tiny drifting plants that feed everything else. And in this way, tides beneath a sleeping sky begin the chain of life. Imagine a whale gliding silently through the deep. She feels the shift. She follows the tides through vast migrations, knowing where food will bloom. Birds follow her path from above, while fish swarm below. All of them trust the tide. All of them listen. In some places, the tides shape entire currents. In the narrow gaps between islands, tidal flows become rivers within the ocean. These swift passages carve pathways for marine life like invisible highways beneath the surface. And the moon, so far away, continues to guide them. Scientists now use satellites to see these movements from space. The ocean's skin ripples slightly as the tide passes through. These tiny changes tell great stories of rising temperatures, of melting ice, of the sea shifting ever so slightly beneath the sky. We see only the surface, but below it entire worlds move. And still, the tide returns. Always. On every coast, in every bay, under every sky. It does not matter if the world is awake or asleep. The tide does not wait for our attention. It does not boast. It simply comes and goes like breath. At night, when the moon is full and the stars reflect in the wet sand, some creatures come alive. Grunion fish ride the waves to shore, laying eggs in the moonlit sand before the tide returns to carry them away. Fireflies above the beach pulse in rhythm. Somewhere perhaps a child dips a finger into a tide pool watching a tiny crab scuttle beneath a shell. Life lit by starlight and fed by tide. But not all the sky's pull is gentle. In the far corners of the earth, massive tides sweep in like whispered giants. In northern Norway, The Saltstraumen maelstrom churns with incredible power, a tidal current spinning faster than any river. The sea folds in on itself, swirling and roaring, yet still, this chaos is born of quiet gravity. Even here the moon speaks softly, and the sea listens wildly. To some, the tide might seem predictable. It comes, it goes again and again. But look closer, and you will see no two tides are the same. The angle of the moon, the pull of the sun, the shape of the shore, all these things add layers to the tide's personality. It is never exactly as it was before, like a lullaby hummed slightly differently each night. And so we begin to understand the tide is a mirror. It reflects the moon above, the land below, and the life it cradles in between. It is both whisper and wait. It carries history in its rhythm and memory in its flow. As the stars shift above, as night deepens and clouds roll over the moon's face, the tide continues. Beneath that sleeping sky, the sea does not rest. It rises and falls with a wisdom too old for words. And we, who walk the edge of the water, are part of its dream. Let us follow this dream further into deeper waters, into slower thoughts, into the quiet science of tides that speak to both sky and sea. There is more to uncover, more to feel, and always the tide to guide us. The sky changes slowly. Stars drift, clouds pass, and the moon moves along her silent path. Below her, the sea remembers. The tide lifts and lowers with a rhythm that began long before our names for it. Beneath that sleeping sky, in waters deep and wide, the earth turns softly under the moon's touch. Let's move deeper now, where the tide story becomes more intricate, more mysterious. Out in the open sea, beyond where the eye can see land, the tides don't crash or roar. They sway, they pulse, like a slow heartbeat in water. This motion isn't always seen on the surface, but far below, the tide's pull becomes powerful. In the deep ocean, thousands of meters beneath the waves, tidal forces stretch and squeeze the water, shifting heat and nutrients from one layer to the next. This mixing is gentle but vital. In these depths, where sunlight never reaches, nutrients settle. If they stayed there, the ocean's upper layers would grow barren, but the moon's gravity stirs them slowly upward. Phytoplankton, the tiny plant-like creatures that float near the surface, depend on these gifts from the deep. They bloom where the tide brings nutrients, and their blooms feed the rest of the sea. From zooplankton to fish, from seals to sharks, everything begins with that invisible lift. The tide becomes a kind of painter, using water as its brush and life as its colour. Each movement creates patterns, plumes of nutrients, swirls of temperature, trails of life, and each of these patterns is shaped by the sky. The moon is not alone in this art. The sun joins in. Though much farther away, the sun's gravity also pulls at the ocean. When the moon and sun align, they amplify each other. The tides grow taller, stronger. These are spring tides, not named for the season, but for their strength. When the moon and sun are at right angles, their forces pull in different directions, softening the tides. These are neap tides, quiet and modest. This celestial geometry is always changing. The moon orbits the Earth not in a perfect circle, but in a soft oval. Some nights she is closer, some farther. This shifting distance changes the tide's height, subtly but meaningfully. Even the tilt of Earth's axis and the shape of the seafloor weave their way into this delicate choreography. Imagine for a moment standing on the cliffs of a distant coast. Below, the sea stretches endlessly. With each tide, the waves climb higher, then slip away. But beneath the surface, currents twist and curl. Fish turn with them. Kelp forests sway like underwater trees. Even sound travels differently as the tide shifts pressure through water. Whales call across vast distances, their voices bending with the tide's breath. Now, think of coral reefs. These vibrant underwater cities depend on light, warmth, and flow. Tides bring fresh water, remove waste, and stir the tiny particles that reef life feeds upon. Coral spawning, the synchronized release of eggs and sperm, happens with the tides, often once a year, triggered by a full moon and the right tide. It is a moment of ancient precision, a moment shaped by the moon's soft clock. Not far away, in the mangrove forests where roots rise from the mud like fingers reaching toward the sky, tides bring change. At high tide, water rushes in, flooding the forest. Fish come to, feeding, hiding, living. At low tide, the water slips away and the land breathes. Crabs scuttle, birds search for food, and the roots stand exposed, waiting for the sea to return. Tides are also carriers of warmth. In places like the Arctic, where sea ice forms, tidal forces break and mix the layers of salty, icy water. As climate changes, these tidal motions grow even more important. They may slow the melting or hasten it. Scientists now study how tides move under ice shelves, how they shape currents that connect oceans, how they might whisper secrets about the Earth's future. And still, through all this change, the tide remains calm. Even when it shifts continents, even when it raises or lowers the sea by meters, it never rushes. It never speaks loudly. Its voice is that of patience, of returning, always returning. People in the past knew this. They told stories of sea spirits, of moon maidens, of water gods who pulled the sea with invisible hands. These stories weren't wrong, only poetic. The truth that a distant moon, born from Earth's own body, pulls on water across oceans, is no less wondrous. Today we understand more, yet the feeling remains the same. We still feel small beside the sea. We still feel time when we watch the tide. It is the moon who teaches us that time is not only counted in seconds, but in waves, in comings and goings, in breath. And maybe we feel something else too, a kind of belonging. For within our bodies there is water. In our blood there is salt. In our cells a memory of ancient oceans. We are not separate from the sea, we are shaped by it, lifted by it, called by it. When we lie under a sky full of stars, the tide is still moving. Somewhere waves are rising, somewhere else they fall. The moon looks down on both places. She does not choose one over the other. She simply pulls, she simply gives. And in this giving, the sea lives, life blooms, the earth breathes. Beneath that sleeping sky, where stars drift and planets glow faintly, the tides continue their gentle work. Let us float now toward the final part of this story. The tide still has one more secret to share. Let us follow it into the soft closing of night, into the hush of understanding. Somewhere, in the hush before dawn, the tide begins to turn again. It has no voice, but still it speaks, not in words, but in movement. It tells stories of the sky and the sea, of gravity and time, of all the things that live quietly between them. As the moon floats westward, still glowing faintly above the horizon, the tide retreats once more, as if bowing. We are nearing the soft ending of this story, but the tide does not end. It only circles back like breath, like thought, like the moon's silver orbit itself. On the surface, the sea is calm, but underneath, the motion continues. Cold waters rise, warm waters sink, currents twist slowly through trenches and along underwater mountains. This silent stirring nourishes the world in ways we cannot always see, and the moon, ever so patient, keeps pulling. Even in places where the tide seems invisible, on still lakes, on quiet inlets, its memory lingers. Tidal forces tug not only at water, but at rock, at earth, at air. Mountains shift slightly. The crust of the planet flexes a little. The solid ground beneath our feet is not truly still. It responds too subtly to the moon's call. The bond between moon and earth is not just physical, it is deeply rhythmic, almost musical. And like all beautiful music, it repeats with variation. The tide's timing is not exact each day. It comes later, by about 50 minutes, because the moon is moving too. The sea adjusts, life adjusts. Nothing is frozen, everything flows. On coasts around the world, the tide sets the stage for change. In places like the Sundarbans, where river meets sea, tigers walk at low tide and the forest floods at high tide. In the mudflats of Australia, thousands of shorebirds arrive just in time for the ebb, feeding on creatures hidden in the wet sand. These migrations, these patterns of flight and feeding, are choreographed by the moon's soft pull. And in the heart of human life, tides appear as well. In coastal towns, people open their shops when the tide is right. Children splash in tide pools. Artists walk the beach, finding shapes left behind by water. In boats, anchored in quiet bays, sleepers sway gently with the rising water, their dreams moving with the sea. Our ancestors once feared the sea. It was vast, mysterious, full of danger, but they also respected it. They watched the tide, learned its rhythm, and sailed with it. They told tales of its power, some true, some imagined, and through these stories they taught their children not only how to survive, but how to wonder. Today we can predict tides with precision. Computers chart their timings, satellites track their height, but no equation can replace the feeling of standing at the edge of the sea as the tide comes in. That feeling of something ancient, something bigger than ourselves, remains. And still, the tide teaches us. It reminds us that change is natural, that retreat is not an end, but part of a return, that even when we cannot see the moon, she is there, guiding things with a quiet, invisible thread. The tides show us how to be patient, how to move without noise, how to lift and let go again and again. They remind us that even the gentlest force can shape the world given time. In recent years, people have begun to listen more carefully to the tide's message. Scientists studying climate change have turned to tidal patterns to understand rising seas. Engineers have learned to use tidal motion to generate energy, clean, constant, like the tides themselves. Architects now design buildings and roads that can live with the tide, not fight it. There is wisdom here, a kind of slow truth, that to live well on Earth we must learn to move like the tide, not rigid, not rushing, but steady, flowing, returning. In the end, perhaps that is what the tide has been telling us all along, that life is not a straight path, but a rhythm, a rise and a fall, a coming and a going, a sleep and a waking. The tide speaks in this language and the sea repeats it. We, if we're quiet, can feel it too. Now the sky is beginning to brighten. The stars fade, the moon slips lower. Somewhere another tide is rising. Somewhere else it falls. And the world turns once more beneath it all. The tide does not need us to notice. It will move whether we watch or sleep. But when we do notice, when we stand still, breathe deeply and listen, we become part of its music. So when you next walk beside the sea, remember, the tide beneath your feet has travelled far. It has moved mountains beneath the waves. It has fed life, carved coasts, lifted boats. It has followed the moon without fail, and it will continue long after our footsteps wash away. Because beneath a sleeping sky, the tide never sleeps. It listens, it breathes, it returns. High above us, the stars shine in quiet patterns, each one distant and patient, sending their ancient light across space. Below, the oceans move with a different kind of light, one we cannot always see, but one that listens. For as strange as it may seem, water listens to the stars. The idea sounds like a poem, but it is also a truth, soft and scientific. The oceans are not still. They shift, swirl and sing under the influence of celestial rhythm. Tides may be pulled by the moon and shaped by the sun, but the stars, their patterns, their gravity, their alignment, whisper to the sea in ways we are only beginning to understand. Long before telescopes, people watched the sky to understand the sea. Sailors in the Pacific followed star paths across endless water, knowing which constellation marked the change of season, which star would lead them home. On land, farmers in river valleys marked the rising of Sirius, the star whose light came just before the Nile's flood. To them, the stars were not distant. They were clocks, calendars, companions. But beyond story and navigation, there is something deeper, a connection between stars and sea, body and cosmos, that lives in the quiet movements of water. Some scientists now study this connection, asking how solar flares and cosmic rays affect the delicate balance of the Earth's magnetosphere, and through it, the oceans themselves. Not every answer is clear, but the questions carry weight. Let us float now into one of these gentle questions. How might the stars, the great furnace lanterns of the universe, shape the way our oceans behave? The sun, closest and brightest of all stars, does not shine steadily. Her light pulses, her winds surge, her surface dances with storms. These solar winds carry charged particles that brush against Earth's magnetic field. When they are strong, they shift currents in the upper atmosphere, causing auroras to shimmer in polar skies. But below, in the oceans, the effect is quieter. The sea, salty and vast, conducts electricity. When the sun's winds grow wild, they stir invisible flows in seawater, especially in the polar regions. These flows do not replace the tides, but they add to the rhythm, tiny, slow pulses of energy that ripple through water. The stars, it seems, do not only shine, they touch. Even the alignment of planets, when giant bodies like Jupiter or Saturn pull faintly in one direction, can add a thread to this tapestry. Their influence is small, almost nothing, but water listens, always. Over long stretches of time, even small pulls can shape patterns of climate, ocean cycles, and the tilt of seasons. Now imagine a night on a still beach. The tide has gone out, and tide pools gleam in the starlight. You bend close and see a small jellyfish pulsing slowly, its body catching the light of the sky. It does not know about gravity or electromagnetism, but it follows the rhythm, rising with the water, retreating with it. Like everything in the sea, it trusts what the body feels, and the body, made of water, always listens. There is something else too, something deep and old, and the oceans are filled with waves, not just the ones we see, but internal waves moving slowly through layers of temperature and salt. These waves can be hundreds of meters tall, though they rise within the sea unseen. Some are shaped by the tides, others by wind, but many are stirred by the rotation of the Earth itself, a spin born from the earliest days of our solar system when stars were just forming. This spin creates the Coriolis effect, a force that guides currents into spirals. In the southern hemisphere, it spins them one way, in the north another. These spirals shape storms, drive gyres, and carry warmth and cold across the globe. They are part of the sea's great circulation, the slow turning of the ocean like a planet within a planet. And all of it, every swirl and shift, still listens to the stars. In the Arctic, where ice floats above dark water, these forces grow more fragile. There, the connection between sky and sea is delicate. As sunlight fades in winter and returns in spring, the sea ice responds. The stars do not change, but our view of them shifts. The balance of energy, the movement of wind and water, all traceable to distant points of light, begins to change again. Water responds in layers. Surface waves dance with the wind. Deeper currents obey temperature and salinity. And beneath all, the slowest movements answer to things far beyond, to the spin of Earth, to the tilt of its axis, to the distant mass of celestial bodies pulling ever so slightly on every drop. And we too, made mostly of water, are not untouched. Our brains spark with electric pulses, our hearts beat with rhythm. Some researchers wonder, quietly, cautiously, whether we carry within us traces of the moon's influence, or even more distant rhythms from the sun's activity. Could cosmic weather touch the weather of thought? These questions have no final answer, but the asking matters, for when we ask, we see how connected we are, not only to each other, but to sky, to sea, to the motion of things too large to name. In Polynesia, it is said that the ocean is not empty, but full of memory, of direction, of ancestors. When water listens to the stars, it remembers where to go, and when we listen to the water, we begin to remember too. Now, as the tide begins to turn again, and the stars shift slightly overhead, let us follow the water into deeper places. There are more layers to uncover, more silence to understand. the story continues, not louder, but gentler, always gentler. There is a slowness in the sea that mirrors the slowness of stars. They do not rush, and neither does the water. Both move through time like breath, like thought, like the unfolding of a quiet dream. Let us drift now into that slower rhythm where water carries the memory of sky, and tides speak in whispers shaped by the universe. The earth spins beneath the stars, and this spinning creates time, not in clocks, but in light and dark, in warmth and chill, in the rise and fall of the ocean's face. The turning planet shapes the Coriolis forces that bend ocean currents into wide, looping spirals. These gyres, slow rivers that twist across the seas, move warmth from the equator to the poles, and cold water back again, and within these spirals, life finds its path. Some of these great ocean currents are guided by tides, but others are steered by the wind, by the shape of continents, and by the tilt of Earth's axis, a tilt born from a collision billions of years ago, a tilt that lets us have seasons and sunsets and tides that change as the sky shifts. Within these massive flows, smaller movements begin. Internal tides push deep beneath the surface, bending layers of water that differ in temperature and salt. These movements are invisible to the eye but stretch across thousands of kilometers, rising slowly up underwater mountains and falling into ocean trenches. They carry oxygen to deep sea life. They stir nutrients upward, helping plankton bloom where whales will feed. These tides do not crash or roar. They drift like thought, like memory. And above, the stars remain, not changing quickly, not demanding to be noticed, yet always influencing, always watching. The sun's cycle, an 11-year rhythm of solar storms and flares, changes the patterns of Earth's upper atmosphere. These changes affect winds, which in turn stir the ocean's surface. On the scale of years and decades, the dance of starlight and wind leaves a mark upon the sea. El Niño and La Niña, those famous ocean patterns, may rise in part from this long celestial conversation. And then there are the tides shaped by geometry, the alignment of moon and earth and sun. Each cycle of alignment brings slightly different energy. The perigean spring tide, when the moon is closest to earth and in line with the sun, lifts the oceans higher than usual. The syzygy, when celestial bodies fall into one straight line, becomes a quiet force of great reach. These are not everyday events, but water remembers them. Each extreme tide reshapes coastlines, refreshes marshes, washes nutrients into the shallows. In those moments, when the stars above form long chains across the sky, the water lifts just a little more and life responds. In estuaries where rivers meet the sea, this cosmic choreography guides entire ecosystems. Salt and fresh water blend in pulses, each one shaped by the tide. Fish migrate in, then out. Crabs bury themselves when the moon grows full. Birds line the shore at low tide, waiting for food to appear. The rhythm does not need a conductor. The stars and sea already know the score. And far below, in places without light, strange creatures rise and fall with the tide. Lanternfish, which glow with their own pale light, swim upward at night to feed, then sink again as morning comes. Their movement is the largest migration on Earth, not by distance but by number. Trillions of tiny lives rising and falling each night, move not by urgency but by gentle habit. They feel the pull of darkness, the rise of water, and the echo of tide shaped by the moon's soft pull. Above them, floating in the blue, jellyfish drift in slow spirals, their bodies responding to pressure, to warmth, to invisible tides. Scientists studying these creatures often find patterns, strange, faint correlations between solar storms and changes in behaviour. No one is certain why, but the sea does not always explain itself. It simply continues. In the coral reefs, light plays a greater role. The moon's glow, filtered through water, marks time. Some species spawn only during certain phases, Once a year, in a window only a few days wide, coral polyps release their eggs and sperm into the night sea. It is a moment of trust in the moon, in the tide, in the stars that have never failed them. Whole reefs coordinate this event, as if sharing a secret only they understand. It is not chaos, it is choreography, written in gravity and starlight in millions of years of practice. And we too are shaped by these rhythms. Some researchers believe our sleep patterns are subtly influenced by the lunar cycle. Others have studied how animal behaviour, migration, feeding, nesting, may connect to solar activity or even planetary alignments. Though much remains unknown, the quiet pull of celestial rhythm is hard to deny. Our ancestors felt this pull without needing to name it. They built stone circles aligned with solstices. They watched the stars rise just before dawn and knew the rains were coming. They followed the tide not just to fish, but to understand the world's breathing. Their science was slow, poetic, and deeply patient. Today we use instruments and models and maps. We look down from satellites. We write equations and draw graphs. But still, there is something unchanged. The way we stop and look up at night, the way the sea pulls at our ankles, the way we feel something shift when the moon is full and the tide is high. The stars do not speak loudly, they do not demand, but the sea listens, always. Now let us drift gently to the final part of this story, where this quiet listening finds its softest echo. There, in the hush between stars and tide, we may find the peace of understanding, not in noise but in rhythm. In the last curve of night, when the stars begin to pale and the sky starts to open to morning, the ocean still moves. The tide lifts slowly once more, not because we watch it, but because it is time. This rhythm, born of gravity and memory, of sky and sea, continues in its gentle way. It is here, in this quiet space between darkness and dawn, that we find the last chapter of our story, where water listens to the stars, and the stars somehow reply. The surface of the ocean may seem calm, but beneath the conversation deepens. There are waves we do not see, slow and wide as continents, moving through layers of salt and cold and time. These waves, like the tides, are shaped by distant forces. The pull of the moon, the turning of the earth, the heat from the sun, and the whisper of cosmic rays. Together they compose the language of the ocean. When we look at the stars, we are looking back in time. Light from the nearest ones took years to reach us, from the farthest millions. The sea too carries time. Its molecules have been part of glaciers, clouds, raindrops, rivers. They've travelled through whales, through coral reefs, through storms and stillness. When we touch the ocean, we touch time made liquid. This connection between sky and sea, time and rhythm, is everywhere. In the slow unfolding of sea ice each winter, in the turning of ocean gyres, in the spawning of fish that wait for starlit tides. The planet does not move in silence. It sings, not in sound, but in pulse, in cycle, in the steady repetition of celestial rhythm echoed in water. And in that song we find the final truth of this story, that nothing is separate, that the stars are not above us, but around us, that the ocean does not simply respond, it remembers, that life itself is a pattern written by the slow movement of light and salt and gravity. In the still waters of the open ocean, where the surface mirrors the sky, this unity is clearest. There, plankton bloom with the rising light, sharks move with the lunar phases, deep-sea vents pulse with tidal pressure. Every movement seems to carry the signature of the stars, their patience, their reach, their calm. Some cultures believe that water is sacred because it reflects the heavens. Others say the soul moves like a tide, leaving and returning. These ideas are old but not forgotten. They remind us that even before science gave names to forces, people felt them. The moon rising over water, the tide answering back, the stars shifting above as the current turned below. Now, with satellites and sensors, we can trace these patterns in great detail. We can map the ocean's rise and fall to the millimetre. We can model the spin of Earth and the path of light across waves. but the wonder remains unchanged. No matter how precisely we measure, the feeling is still one of awe. Think of a whale diving deep into the ocean's belly, guided by the tilt of the earth and the faint warmth of a current born in sunlight. Think of a crab merging from the sand at just the right tide, following an instinct written in starlight. Think of a small fishing boat rising and falling with the swell, the crew watching the stars for weather, for luck, for home. We are part of this rhythm too. Our hearts beat, our breath rises and falls, our thoughts arrive in waves. Inside us, salt water flows, echoing an ocean that has shaped us from the beginning. And so when we look up, when we see Orion's belt, or the curve of the Milky Way, or the soft light of a planet wandering across the sky, we might also feel something stir below. The sea, listening, the tide lifting, the old pattern still holding. As dawn arrives, the stars fade. Their light is not gone, only hidden. The tide too slips back, leaving behind wet sand, tiny shells, the delicate trace of what was and will be again. Nothing is truly lost. It is only moving, only turning, only returning. Perhaps the greatest truth is the simplest one. The universe is not still. It flows. The stars, the sea, the life between them, all are part of a movement so slow and so beautiful we can only begin to understand it. But in every tide that rises, in every wave that falls, in every glance up at the sky, we are reminded, we are not apart, we are within. So let the tide move gently through you. Let the stars speak through the hush of water. Let the sea remind you that the world listens, always. And in the space between ocean and sky, between light and darkness, between silence and story, you may find a peace as deep as the sea and as patient as the stars. There is a place deep within the ocean that never sees the light. It is cold, quiet, and hidden from the sun, but it moves. Slowly, steadily it breathes, not as lungs do with air, but with water, great volumes of it turning over in silence. This is the ocean's heart, and the tides are its breath. The sea is not one single body. It is layered and alive. At the surface, wind stirs waves and sunlight warms the skin of the water. But far below, in the dark zones where pressure crushes and silence reigns, the ocean moves with ancient force. This deep current is part of a global circulation, a looping path of water that connects every sea, every shore, every storm. Scientists call it the thermohaline circulation, thermo for heat, haline for salt. It is driven by differences in temperature and salinity. Cold, salty water is heavier than warm, fresh water, so it sinks. In the polar regions, as sea ice forms, it pushes salt into the surrounding water, making it even denser. That water sinks to the ocean floor and begins a slow, wandering journey across the globe. It may take 1,000 years to surface again, carrying with it the memory of ice and shadow. This movement is not fast, not loud, it is patient, and it is vital. It carries oxygen to the deep sea. It pulls carbon from the surface and stores it in the cold. It moves nutrients that feed the surface life. It shapes climate, balances weather, connects continents. It is the quiet engine of the earth. And the tide, ever gentle, ever returning, plays a part in this breath. Tidal mixing, the slow stirring of water caused by the moon's pull, helps link the surface to the deep. In narrow straits, over underwater ridges, in far-flung trenches, the tides create turbulence, not chaos, but movement. This subtle energy keeps the ocean's layers from falling into stillness. Imagine now the ocean as a vast, sleeping creature, its chest rising and falling every few hours with the tide, its deeper breath taking centuries. The tides are the shallow inhale, the thermohaline current, the exhale that spans lifetimes. In fjords and channels, this breath becomes visible. The tide moves water in and out, flushing nutrients, renewing life. In places like the Scottish Highlands or the Pacific Northwest, entire ecosystems depend on this steady breath. Kelp forests, mussel beds, salmon runs, all linked to the tidal rhythm and the deeper circulation that feeds them. Even tiny creatures respond. Phytoplankton bloom when nutrients rise. Zooplankton follow, fish come next, seals and whales after. The breath begins below, and it rises through layers of life up through salt and time until it breaks the surface in birdsong and foam. The ocean's breath also connects past to future. Much of the carbon we produce, from burning fuels, from changing forests, is drawn down by the ocean. The breath of the ocean takes in this carbon and carries it below. Some of it may stay there for centuries, some may return one day. The tide in its daily motion adds to this exchange, pulling gases across the surface, lifting deep water when the moon aligns just right. And what of the life that lives in the dark, in the ocean's true heart? They too move with the tide. Giant isopods scurry across the bottom. Dumbo octopuses drift like quiet ghosts. Sea cucumbers feed where particles fall. These creatures do not see the moon, but they know its touch. They feel the pressure shift. They know the breath has returned. This movement is fragile. As the world warms, ice melts faster. Salinity changes. Circulation slows. The ocean's breath may falter. Already, scientists measure signs of this slowing in the North Atlantic. The breath is shallower than it once was, but the tide, faithful and soft, continues to stir. And perhaps it is this tide, this endless whisper, that will help the ocean continue to breathe. Even as winds shift and waters rise, the moon does not abandon the sea. She pulls as she always has, and the sea replies as it always must. Now picture yourself floating on the open sea. Below you, the water is layered with warmth and memory. Somewhere far beneath, a current that began centuries ago passes slowly beneath your feet. You do not feel it, but it is there. Like a heartbeat you can only hear if you listen long enough. This is the breath of the ocean's heart. This is the slow exhale of a planet alive with water. Let us follow it deeper into the quiet spaces where life begins and time flows in slow spirals. Let us continue to listen. In the deep folds of the ocean, where the sunlight never reaches and the cold presses in from all sides, water moves with a purpose so ancient it feels like the memory of the earth itself. This is the realm of the ocean's slowest breath. A current that bends beneath continents, that whispers beneath storms, that carries the weight of centuries between layers of silence. And though we do not often think of it, the moon plays a part here too. Her pull does not stop at the shore. It reaches down into the dark, into the stillness, into the breath that makes life possible. Let us follow this breath, not as a diver, not as a swimmer, but as a thought drifting with the tide. We begin where cold water sinks, near Greenland, near Antarctica, where winter and ice press the salt into the sea, making it dense, heavy, ready to fall. This water does not rush. It slips downward like a sigh, sliding along the seafloor, finding paths between mountain ranges submerged in shadow. Along the way, it gathers suns. It carries the fingerprints of ice, the trace of wind, the faint echo of melting snow. As this deep water moves, it collects stories, tiny minerals from old riverbeds, a molecule of oxygen from a polar breeze, the memory of a whale's call, distant and low. It travels past trenches where life glows in the dark, past volcanic vents where chemicals rise in spirals. It turns corners beneath continents, sometimes pushed, sometimes pulled, but always moving, always breathing. Above, in shallower water, the tide stirs gently. It moves across underwater ridges, lifting cold water toward the surface. These upwellings bring with them the breath of the deep, nutrients that feed blooms of plankton, which in turn feed the fish, the birds, the great whales that follow. Every sardine school, every leaping dolphin, every colony of seabirds feeding their young is part of this cycle. It all begins with a breath that began in darkness, and this breath is not uniform. It changes with the shape of the sea, with the pull of the moon, with the winds above and the ice below. In some places the mixing is strong, the tide pushing water through narrow gaps and deep sounds. In others, the sea turns slowly, layers drifting with more caution, more grace. The balance is delicate, but not fragile. The ocean has been breathing this way for millions of years. People are only beginning to understand the full depth of this cycle. Satellites measure sea surface temperatures. Instruments anchored deep in the sea record pressure, salinity, current. Scientists listen to the echoes of sound waves bouncing through the ocean to track its inner motion. What they find is both complex and calm, a system that never stops, that rarely hurries, that holds the planet in balance. And yet this balance can shift. As glaciers melt more quickly, the water they release is fresh, not salty. This disrupts the process of sinking in the polar regions. Without enough salt, the water does not fall. Without that fall, the global current begins to slow. The breath becomes shallower. The ocean's ability to carry oxygen to the deep, to store carbon from the air, to bring nutrients to the light, all of it begins to soften. In the North Atlantic, where the breath once began with strength, signs of slowing have been seen. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. It is like noticing that a sleeping creature is exhaling just a little less each hour. The tide still stirs, the wind still spins, but the breath is changing. And still, life responds. Jellyfish bloom where balance tips. Coral reefs suffer when warm currents linger too long. Fish shift their migrations, seeking cooler waters. Whales turn, following ancient paths that now feel unfamiliar. The breath continues, but the rhythm falters. But this story is not only one of loss, it is also one of resilience. The tide, in its quiet consistency, keeps stirring the sea. Even in the face of change, it continues to lift, to mix, to carry. Coastal ecosystems rise and fall with the tide, and in that movement they adapt. Marsh grasses grow taller, mangrove roots reach wider, creatures find new rhythms within the old pattern. And humans too are learning to listen. Oceanographers study the breath of the sea not just with instruments, but with reverence. They speak of deep time, of currents that cross generations, of water that moves so slowly it connects our present to the ancient past. And those who live close to the water, fishers, sailors, divers, already know the feel of the ocean's breath. They may not speak of thermohaline circulation or tidal mixing, but they understand the pulse of the sea. When we watch the tide come in, we are witnessing just one part of a much longer inhale. When it recedes, it is the beginning of an exhale that may take centuries to complete. The surface moves in hours, the deep moves in lifetimes. Yet both are part of the same breath. Now imagine yourself standing on a quiet beach at twilight. The tide is low, revealing wet sand, pools, small shells. Above, the first stars blink into view. Beneath your feet, water is moving, not just under the shore, but far below, across the planet. You cannot feel it, but it is there, carrying salt and memory, oxygen and time. The ocean breathes, and through it, the world is kept alive. Let us follow the last part of this story into the softest fold of the ocean's rhythm. There, where the sea returns to itself, we will find what the heart of water has always known. That breath is not just survival but connection, a tide that never ends. The final part of the journey begins not with a wave, but with a pause, the quiet moment when the tide has reached its fullest breath, and all the water seems to hold still. There is no splash, no hurry, just stillness, like the held breath of a sleeping earth. And then, slowly the water turns again, beginning its return. The ocean exhales. This exhale does not happen all at once. It flows soft and wide through rivers of salt and depth. It drifts from poles to equator, from cold to warmth, from silence to sound. The great current continues its patient sweep across the globe, beneath ships, beneath storms, beneath the eyes of satellites. It does not need to be seen to be real, it only needs to move. Every molecule of water carries a story. One drop may have frozen in the Antarctic 2,000 years ago, sunk to the deep, and now be rising again in the Pacific, lifting with the tide, bringing with it the faint memory of ancient ice. Another may have been caught in a monsoon, swept through a river, and fallen into the sea, becoming part of the breath once more. The ocean's cycle is vast, but it is also intimate. It touches every shore, every cloud, every cell. As the ocean exhales, it gives oxygen, nutrients, life. Cold water from the deep rises up, stirring the layers, breaking the stillness. This upwelling nourishes everything it touches. It feeds the smallest plankton and the largest whale. It sustains coral reefs, fuels fish migrations, shapes the seasons of entire coastlines. And though we cannot see the breath itself, we see what it creates: abundance, balance, rhythm. There is no corner of the ocean untouched by this breath. Even the enclosed seas like the Mediterranean listen to it. Even the inland bays, the estuaries, the coral atolls, they feel its effect. In fjords, the tide moves vertically, like a bellows, breathing in cold from below and exhaling warmth into the air. In the Arctic, the retreat of ice reveals new paths for the breath to move through, changing patterns long held in place. The sea adjusts, remembers, continues. But the breath of the ocean is not just a physical thing, it is emotional too. To sit by the shore and listen to the tide is to feel the world move in slow language. Each wave is a word. Each pause between waves is a moment of listening. The sea does not speak in urgency. It speaks in return, in patience, in the promise that it will always come back. As we face a world that changes quickly, with melting ice, warming air, rising seas, the breath of the ocean becomes a teacher. It shows us that even the largest systems depend on the smallest differences: a degree of warmth, a grain of salt, a shift in wind. It teaches that the balance of life is not found in strength alone, but in movement, in flexibility, in listening. And still the tide continues, day after day, pulling water in, letting it go, breathing. It connects all things, the moon in her orbit, the sun in its flare, the stars far beyond, the gravity of Earth, the layers of sea, the breath of the ocean is the thread between them, a rhythm that binds light to salt, ice to heat, life to time. Perhaps this is what the sea has always known, that nothing stands still, that everything must move to live, that even silence is part of the breath, that the deepest truths do not shout. They rise slowly like deep water, like tides, like understanding. There are places in the world where you can see the ocean's breath written in the land. In tidal flats, where mud cracks like old parchment. In salt marshes, where each blade of grass bends and rises with the tide. In cliffs carved smooth by centuries of waves, the ocean breathes and the earth responds. There are places in the heart too, where we feel this rhythm. In the quiet between thoughts, in the calm that comes from walking beside water, in the dreams that drift like sea foam at night. We carry the ocean in us, not just in our blood, not just in our salt, but in our rhythm, in the rise and fall of what we feel, in the return. So as this story closes, know that it does not end. The breath continues. Somewhere right now the tide is turning. Somewhere deep below cold water is rising. Somewhere the ocean is lifting its voice in silence, saying, I am still here. I am still breathing. And we who are part of this world may breathe with it, slowly, softly, like water, like the tide, like the heart of something much greater than ourselves. The ocean exhales, and in that exhale the world becomes whole again,